Here we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Environment, Housing and Communities Scrutiny Board. I'd just like to start the meeting by offering the members of the Community Environment and Housing Board to introduce themselves. If they're elected members, to let people know which ward they are from, and for those people who are viewing on the webcast, exactly what your geographical association is. So I'll start off. I'm Councillor Stuart Galton, I'm the chair of the board and I represent Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, I'm Debbie Oldham and I'm clerk to the board today.
Morning, Councillor Pauline Graham, long-standing member of the board. From Crossgates and Winmore Ward, I'm looking at the chair.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Javed Akhtar, represent Little London Woodhouse and City Centre.
Good morning, everybody. Adrian McCluskey, Farnley and Wortley.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Andy Rowntree, representing Kirkstall.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Annie Maloney, Beeston and Holbeck Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley and Rawdon Ward, substituting for Councillor Hannon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, I'm Councillor Penny Stables from Wetherby Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Simon Seary from the Pudsey Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adeline Wharfdale Ward.
Good morning, Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Morning, everybody. This is Councillor Mary Harland, Exec Board Member for Communities.
Morning, Councillor Jess Lennox, Exec Board Member for Housing.
Good morning, James Rogers, Director of Communities, Housing and Environment.
And good morning, John Woolmer, Chief Officer for Environmental Services.
Very good. Right, so we all know each other. Welcome for let's go over the business for today. Over to Debbie to go through the first items on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no late items. Agenda item 3, there are no exempt items. And agenda item 4, can I ask members to declare any interests? I'll take silence as there are none. Agenda item 5, we have apologies from councillors Hannon, Tudor and Harrington, and we have Councillor Thompson, who is the substitute for Councillor Hannon today. We've also received apologies from Councillor Rafiq, who was due to attend for item 7.
Very good. Now we'll move on to the next item, which is the minutes. Do any of the members of the board have any comments on the minutes?
If I could just note one item under matters arising on minute 10, members have requested that future performance reports include core city comparisons for recycling rates. This has been picked up by John Woolmer, but in the interim, the 21-22 data as published by DEFRA was provided by John and circulated to members yesterday.
Any other comments? We'll move on to the first item of discussion, which is the future of waste services. Of course, we've got Mr. Woolmer here and James Rogers, and the executive member isn't present at the moment, but should be able to join us later in the meeting, time permitting. I'd just like to invite the executive officers to introduce the item, because of course we don't want you to go through all of the information that's in there and set us up for a discussion. Thank you, Mr. Woolmer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just very briefly. This report's brought to scrutiny on the back of 3 or 4 previous reports and meetings where we've discussed the emerging waste strategy. And the board will recall that a working group was set up, a joint working group with the Resources Strategy Board in 2022. The last meeting that we reported back to was in November 22. And the board agreed that any future Leeds waste strategy should need to ensure it fulfilled the requirements of the government's National Resource and Waste Strategy. The final details have yet to be confirmed. So the main part of this report updates you on that. And as the chair says, hopefully you've had a chance to read some of the detail of that, and we can have a discussion around that. And I'm here to answer any further questions ever around that. I think the headline I draw from that is there hasn't been much significant progress since the November 22 meeting in terms of the detail that all councils are expecting from government, from DEFRA, in terms of the future requirements for refuse collections. I'd just remind members and pick out the point that's in the report that how we currently sit legally is that there was Environment Act 2021 that gained royal assent, and that's the act that sets out new requirements for councils, legal requirements to separately collect garden waste, which is not currently, or wasn't before, a legal requirement, food and glass. And the reason we're not doing that, and no councils are acting on that act at the moment, is the next step that we're all waiting for is for government to release the more information and detail on how those requirements should be met and what they call a commencement date for those requirements. So all councils across the country are waiting for that information and working behind the scenes with DEFRA where we can on that. The report gives you quite a lot of detail in terms of background documents and the conversations that are taking place with DEFRA around that. So that's the main body of the report. I also used the opportunity through discussions with the chair to include another couple of updates within the report. So you'll see there's also an update where we are on the route review at the moment, and also the proposed glass collection pilot trial for the city. So they're the 3 main parts of the report. The main purpose of the report is to come to you with the detail around the waste strategy, and in particularly the current position on each of those elements.
Thank you. I'll open up to members of the board. I know that Councillor Rowntree has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things, actually. First off, just be thinking about how we get residents to engage with a broader range of containers. I know from people elsewhere in the country that where my mother lives in the south, they have about their local council gives them about 7 containers for recycling, and she completely ignores 3 of them, and I think that's quite common. So I'm wondering how you feel about what we could do to engage them and get them used, and any sort of notion of how we're doing at the moment with our 2 or 3 bins, and to what extent they are used appropriately, and what kind of a basis we've got for expanding the number of containers when that's required of us. And if I can sort of slide in a fairly parochial question at this point, in relation to the route review. There's part of my ward, the Burley end of the Kirkstall ward, where we are still on a one green bin collection per month, and have been promised for quite a long time now that this is going to be addressed. Now, I'm just thinking, if the route review takes place as it takes place in the end of this year, late autumn, as you've said, is that something that's going to be we're going to get to our fortnightly collections at that point? If for any reason the schedule for the route review slips, can we not address our fortnightly collections separately, because it's been going on an extremely long time and we do seem to have been left behind compared to the rest of Leeds? And we've got a situation where green bins are getting full, people are putting recyclable waste in the black bins because there's nowhere else to do it. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for those 2 main issues that you've raised. I think in terms of the first points and questions, again, probably something I can pick up with you outside the meeting to bring you up to speed with some of the previous discussions we've had at Scrutiny around that. So part of the previous inquiries did touch on that, and we provided, for example, information around the different options for how we could collect in the future waste from Leeds. To a degree, that's kind of been taken over with the government's own resource waste strategy and the options that we're waiting for from then in terms of how we'll be funded for things, particularly as the report points out, how that relates to extended producer responsibility around packaging and what our requirements for that will be. And the deposit return scheme is a good example of how that might influence what we do. So if a deposit return scheme does come in as it's been committed by the government, then that will take plastic and metal drinking containers out of the waste stream, which is a good thing in terms of taking that from littering and taking it out of the waste stream, and therefore hopefully increasing recycling and decreasing littering. But it obviously influences then what's in our green bins, what we might have in containers, and so it's all related. So that's why I tried to capture that in the report, the complexities, but I'm more than happy to meet you around that and catch up with some stuff around that. And that'll link into what we do around engagement in the future, and that we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach in Leeds to how we, whatever it is we do. So, for example, if we did go down a glass collection and a food collection separately, we'd have to be looking at how that is done separately in different parts of the city. I would suggest the challenges in some of our highly terraced and densely populated areas of the city where there's little drives and already potentially over a spill of bins, literally, that's going to require a different solution than to more suburban areas that have got the drives, the capacity to be able to deal physically with bins, as well as our own collection practicalities. So I'm quite happy, if that's okay, to meet with you separately and provide information around that. The specific question around alternate week collection rollout, yes, you're absolutely right. That's part of what the route review will do. So you should be about to get out, all members should be sent out an email relatively soon in the next week or two, inviting you to a meeting with ourselves. So all 99 members will get an invitation to meet with us in a way and place that's convenient to you. So that it's an existing ward member meeting, or we'll do some drop-in sessions here at the Civic Hall where you can come and meet us, book half an hour in with us. And we will send you in advance of that and provide you at the meeting in whichever format you prefer, electronically, in a shared folder or physically. Two things. One will be the maps of the routes for you to look at, so see what the proposals are in your area, which particular streets are going to be collected, which has been moved to hard to access routes, which hasn't been. And part of that will be which routes have moved to alternate week collection. So we should have picked up all those things. There's still an opportunity, that's the final opportunity, to raise fundamental concerns, to say, well, I was expecting those 4 streets to move to alternate week collection the way you've described them all, but however many streets it is, I'm a bit surprised to see that isn't there. Let's have a discussion about that. I hope that wouldn't be the discussion. I hope we've picked up on everything. So that's the idea. And then, as you say, we'd implement that in autumn time across the city, which will be a very big bang implementation and will be a challenge, should we put it, because it will impact on almost everybody in the city in terms of their collection days being changed. So that's when it should happen. The final part of the question was, well, if it slips anymore, can we not do something in isolation? The first way I'll answer that is we do not want this to slip anymore. We want to implement that this year, and that we are focused on doing that and getting this in place. I'm happy to have that discussion if that happened, but I'd rather focus on saying we're going to deliver this. Yeah.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John. And in Crossgates and Winmore ward, the issue that I find the most for complaints is the bins, which when they've been collected, that they're then broken, cracked or whatever. Do you think that the quality of the bins we've got now is not as good as the previous ones that we had?
Thank you, and thank you for that feedback. They shouldn't be. There's a rigorous procurement process in place that includes the standard that they must reach, an industry standard, and the contractor that won the contract should be providing bins that meet that standard. We do have a team a small team, as you know, that are responsible for bin deliveries, and as part of that responsibility, oversee the contract and making sure the contract is meeting what it should do. if you have got specific concerns and examples you can share with me, I'm more than happy to work with the team and look at that and see if they share your view. And if that would be the case, we'd need to take that with the contractor. I have to say at the moment, my response probably, I don't think there's evidence of that across the city, but that's not therefore that I wouldn't look at it and it's something that maybe is a problem. I don't believe it's a problem, but we would deal with that through the contracts if you do really think that's causing problems.
Thank you. I think maybe on our routes, on a certain route, maybe we've got some very active bin men that throw the bins around. Okay, thank you.
Women.
Councillor Actor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up from Councillor Rontry's point, just recently came to our attention that we have a similar problem in Hyde Park, where the green bins are getting collected monthly, but the black bins are collected every 2 weeks. Now, problem is that once, for whatever reason, the bins have been missed, that means that the residents will have to wait another month before they can come back and collect the green bins. So that's 2 months. And some occasions it gets even worse. Now the whole exercise and the reason that we want to promote the recycling, and the residents should take a pride, and there are a lot of good residents who do take pride in recycling. And I think having a monthly and then waiting for autumn for a review, I think those wards which are affected, especially Burley, which has led from Headingley, Hyde Park, Burley, Kirkstone, Burley area, and then Headingley and Hyde Park, and then comes down to Little London and Woodhouse. That little stretch, I think you've got for some reason every monthly collections. If we can have some sort of meeting outside this meeting with yourself as a 3 wards understanding, and I think address this particular problem, because as I said, there are very good residents who really want to work with us to recycle goods, but unfortunately the window period that they have, they can't do it, if you can understand. And also the problem is that once we miss these bins, we don't, these are the back-to-back houses, and they don't have either the somewhere to place those bins, and then those bins are ended up on Burley Lodge Road for months and months, if you can understand. So let's have a communication outside this meeting with the Kirkstone ward members, Headingley and Hyde Park and Little London, and see that little stretch can be addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm very happy to arrange that and meet with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. We're still finding quite often that missed collections are not being reported on the end of day report, and we're having to chase them. And unfortunately, we often don't get much of a response or a resolution. It seems to be often changed crews, roadworks and things, but it's just repeatedly happening, often in a small patch, but people get quite frustrated. Be happy to follow that up. I think there may be parts of Armley also affected by the monthly collections, but not certain. So it might be, if so, it might be worth involving Armley members as well, if possible. And finally, I know it's something that's been raised with you before, and there may be other areas as well in the outer parts of the city, particularly where we have areas that are vulnerable to strong winds, and the green bins particularly blow over, strewing waste. Where they've been wheeled up an embankment, they blow over, and they're vulnerable before they're collected. If there's anything we could do to look at those. I know there's one particular one in our ward, but I suspect there may be others as well in outer areas particularly. Thank you.
Yeah, again, through the chair, probably something to pick up outside the meeting in terms of local issues with yourselves, and apologies for any, I think it's an ongoing issue, to be fair, that is reported probably every scrutiny board that I'm at, in terms of the problem caused by the lack of reporting of missed bins on the end of day report. I think we all agree the end of day report as a product has improved considerably over the last few years and provides really good information that's useful to yourself, which is great, but you don't know what you don't know, and we don't know what we don't know as well, so it causes us problems as well. So just to reassure again, members, that is a huge priority for us in terms of getting that right. We are investing in upgrading the in-cab technology units that so the into tablets that are mobile. That will help us considerably with making sure that they're being used properly by the charge hands and making sure they're actually working. They're currently, most of them are hardwired in, and they have been for forever. And that is something that has caused part of the problems. It's not an excuse, but it doesn't help in terms of us changing and encouraging and supporting, and where else more been a little bit more insistent with the charges around recording the message. So apologise for that, but we are on with that. There was a last point, sorry, Councillor, around. Yes, so yeah, absolutely. And I think in the Guiseley area, we'd worked with a local group through Litter Free Leeds around producing some stickers that could be put on the bins to encourage people to look out for forecast of windy weather, and therefore to be thinking a little bit about huddling the bins together a bit for presentation, and just thinking whether they actually need to present the bins on that occasion. Other than that, it's difficult to understand what the solution may be, because we can't weigh down the bins. So we did look at, just to reassure you, we have looked at those sort of things. Can we provide heavier bins, something with a ballast at the bottom, something that makes so they're shut with some sort of mechanism? So we have looked at all those things, and all those things don't seem to be achievable. And we've not found anywhere in the country where that happens. But we'll always be looking at, and we are very conscious of that issue around wind, particularly for the empty ones.
Thank you. Just for members to note, if you've already spoken, I will bring in other members first before I invite you to speak again, if you've indicated. Councillor Seary.
Yeah, good morning. Morning, John. Just want to refer to the page 25, the costs breakdown. I'm just interested that the current green bin disposal costs are nearly £1 million, but I just presume that we lay this onto a field, didn't we, and allow it to rot naturally. So I'm wondered why it costs us so much. But then when you compare it to the citywide food costs at the top, is like 300,000, but that's a bigger. You've got more teams, more wagons as well, but the cost is considerably less. So I just wondered how we would dispose of the food.
Thanks, Councillor. So we're looking at the current garden waste costs and the Appendix B. And so you're looking at the current disposal costs, right? Okay, of £900,000, and the food is, and it's simply due to the fact that that's what the contract costs to. It's not a cost neutral contract to dispose of the garden waste. That's what it costs. We provide. I've said this before, I'll say again, the largest garden waste collection service in the United Kingdom, 217,000 households. Our tonnage is way above any other council in the country, and that is the cost of processing all that and composting it, as you say. And the food is cheaper to process because it has a value greater than the compost that's produced. So it brings the cost down of the processing bit of it. So that's why there's the difference. But again, more than happy to drill down on some of this information with you separately, Councillor Seary, if you'd like any of that, just to be reassured and out of interest. I can provide you with the cost per tonne of the processing for each and the tonnages, if that would help. Yeah.
Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. It's just in relation to the service review and communication strategy. How much notice are we planning to give residents of their change of bin days?
Okay, going through the share. We've got a communications strategy developing at the moment, and we've got some drafts of what we'll be sending to residents and just working through those at the moment. Again, once we're in a position to share those with members, we will do, because we'd like your comment around that, around any suggestions you'd have to change it and change some of the wording. We'll be looking within the programme to probably give people, it's the balance, a bit like the Christmas change. You don't want it too far away, but you don't want it too near. So we'll probably be looking at 2 or 3 weeks before that kind of, but then what we've got to bear in mind is that it'll affect people on different parts of their cycle. So there's a couple of councillors said in parts of the city, they're only getting a once a month collection of green bins as it is. So if you only give people 2 weeks notice, it might be how that falls in their collection calendar. But that sort of period, around 2 or 3 weeks, we'd think. But again, we're more than happy to receive your views on that either way. But we think that's about the right medium. But we do have a legal responsibility to I mean, that's an important point. We have a legal responsibility to write to everybody, to tell them that it will cost us and be an exercise in itself, but we can't get around that We don't want to get around that, but we can't get around it in terms of using electronic or social media communications to avoid writing to people. We'll obviously do that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Just quickly on the comment that Mr. Wilmer gave to Councillor Thompson. If you put bins together, unfortunately, some bin crews will then accuse residents of putting out more than one bin and refuse to take away any that are together. And also the crews will then split them up because they'll take them two at a time to the back of the vehicle and then just throw them at the side of the road. They don't necessarily take them back to where they are. And where there is wind, and I accept that there is a lot, you'd have that problem that the crews do not put the bins back from whence they came. They always put them back in an approximate location from where they came. And so if we've got 4 or 5 or 6 together, the chances are they'll be split into 3 separate groups by the time the crews. So we need to then get the crews not to be in such a rush to get them to get up and down the street and out the road, that they need to take their time. The other day, for example, there was only 3 bins in my street that were brown taken out. My bin ended up down the bottom of the street because the nearest one to it was down the bottom, so they wheeled it all the way around the bottom. It just, they don't think because they're in a hurry to finish their round. So it's how do we solve those problems? Because it's not just in the north of the city, other people have that problem as well. And it's particularly a problem with brown bins because the brown bin crews are very, very hot on not collecting more than 1 brown bin from a household. And if you put 2 beside each other, they certainly are not taking them. And that's causing significant concerns.
Yeah, I think in terms of the first point, there's a number of points there. The first point about relating to the local bit of work we've done that referred to around that. That's not something to be clear, I'm saying is our policy that you huddle bins together across the city if ever there's a wind. That was something specifically we worked with a local residents group, and the feedback I've certainly had on that is positive, and that's worked well. And that was a specific almost street, I think it was, where it's on a hill and it's particularly windy on an incline, and the people getting fed up with the bins falling over when they were full and creating litter. And that's a very local bespoke pragmatic solution we've come with and worked well. Again, I take the point, and it's been discussed here a number of times around the presentation of bins back to the place that they came from. And again, what I'll do is just repeat what I've said before around the work we're doing with crews through appraisals and through supportive meetings, and then if necessary, other stages around that. We're also working at the moment with corporately around trying to be better at reducing obstacles and obstructions on the pathway with bins. We're looking at developing some work around that with Pavements for People and others around that. Probably looking at some kind of video that we can both use to work with staff to make it clearer to them in a more real way, the problems that leaving bins in a way that obstructs pedestrians, how that affects people, but also to the video to be aimed at residents as well, because the problem isn't just about crews leaving the bins in places that obstruct people. There is some reasons to do that as well. But I do take the point, and it's something we will continue to try and keep our improvement on.
Thank you, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, John, for the report. And just on the communication, John, as you know, there's lots of residents, their English is not their first language, and what work is being done to communicate with those residents whose English is not their first language? That's number one. The other one is legislation on bins left on the footpaths, and because you know the ward I represent, Birmingham House, Richmond Hill area, we've got back-to-back properties, we've got terrace properties, and people do leave bins on the footpath. What legislation do we have to enforce so people can take those bins back into their properties or in their gardens?
Thanks, Councillor Khan. The first one around comms, that's something we'll work with corporately, colleagues on that in terms of advice around how we best communicate with the different communities across Leeds. And obviously language is one of those issues, but there are other characteristics that being engagement needs to be thought of in a different way. So we'll be working with them on that, and also very happy as we move towards the implementation of the new routes to work locally with members around any particular help they can, advice they can give in terms of making sure we're reaching all the communities that we can do. So we're very conscious of the fact that we need to make sure that everybody understands what's being asked of them. In terms of the bins on the street, again, it's something we've covered at this board before in terms of an inquiry. But again, enforcement is difficult, to be honest, in terms of bins on street. There is legislation available in terms of people obstructing the pavement, but it's very difficult to prove and enforce. So usually our way is to try and persuade people. So whether that's a letter drop to the street, or an individual knocking on the door, or conversation with a particular person that's causing a problem. But in terms of enforcing it, proving that they have put the bin out, they've left it out, it's their bin, all that sort of stuff, it's very difficult and time consuming and resource consuming, and isn't usually the way to sort it out. There is, through in certain parts of the city, where we've introduced it, the PSPO, which does allow us to, well, not allow us to, we because of that have put some extra resource into those streets. But again, it's a very resource intensive way of doing things, but it has had some benefits in parts of Harells where that's being done, in parts of Headingley. But it's a very localised, almost street by street PSPO in terms of implementing it. But again, that is an option open to us to look at PSPO in an area where it's causing a particular problem. But it has to be accompanied with the additional resource to do it, because the worst thing we can do, and we do get some comments around this in the PSPO areas, or where there's areas that think there's a PSPO in force, but we're not enforcing it. The problem that problem, we raise expectations that something can be solved with by doing it this way, but then if we don't have the resources to police it and enforce it, then actually it creates almost more frustration than there was in the first place. But again, I'm very happy to talk at a local level around specific issues and specific streets where that's a problem, and look at what the solution might be locally.
Sorry, Councillor Cowan, you have a supplementary, do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Briefly, Chair. And also, John, what relationships do neighbourhood cleaning team and the waste management have? Because what tends to happen is a cleaning team goes out in the area, cleans up the area, then the bin men come, empty it, but there's overspill as well. And also, it should be the other way around. The bin men should come in the morning, and then the cleaning team should go after. What relationship do we, and what communication both departments have, and how closely do they work together?
Thank you, Councillor Khan, and again through the chair. Yeah, that's an issue again that's been raised over the years, and something I think we're a lot better at doing. I think that what we need to be clear is that it's not always that simple. So the collection day for the green bin and the black bin and the brown bin might be different days. There might be the part of the area is got a monthly green collection, part of it's got a fortnightly, all the issues we've just discussed. So it's not just a case of the refuse come round on a Tuesday, so we can always send the cleaning team out on a Wednesday. It's far more complex, as you know, particularly in your ward, Councillor Khan, than that. So there's not an easy, of course, let's just get them cleaning team out after. That said, I know that particularly in the Inner East area, that is something that the Clean and Neighbourhood team that covers the Burns, Hospital Hill and Harells ward in particular tries to do. They have particular days that they focus on different parts of those wards. And Stuart Brown, the area manager for that area, I only met with him yesterday to review some of the arrangements. And that's what he tries to do, exactly what he tries to do. So he tries to pick the day that is the best fit for being as soon after certainly the black bin collections happen in that area. So again, it's always something. So to answer the questions, yes, we do work across services, environmental services in that way. Again, part of moving to Newmarket House was to try and get us all a little bit physically closer together and work a little bit more on those types of issues as team leaders. There's still a bit of work in progress with that. And part of the route review is also to look at, and this is a key part that I think they get probably, I'm at fault for not highlighting it enough. The route review, understandably, members around the table want to focus on the routes and what that means in terms of alternative collection, missing bins and that. But also we want to redesign the routes so they're more coterminous to community committee boundaries. And therefore, we'll also look at how they are supervised and managed to bring that more in line with community committees like Cleaner Neighbourhoods. So that will in itself help with the sort of a more natural way of the services working close together and our accountability through the community committees in terms of providing you with information and reassuring you around that coordination.
Thank you, Councillor Stables.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, John. A couple of questions. One was following up from Councillor Graham's point about damaged bins, and it was, what's the process around residents who have a damaged bin getting a replacement, and should they be being charged for them if it's damage caused by a collection? And the reason I ask that is I've recently been contacted by a resident who was complaining that they were being charged £20 for replacement when the bin had been damaged. I think after following up from that, when they did reply again, I think it has been replaced, but I just wanted to understand the process that was involved in that. And the second question was about assisted collections. And whether that's being taken account of in terms of the route reviews and obviously the extra time that they take to get those assisted bin collections. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Again, through the chair. 2 points. So the damaged bins, what's the process? So very quickly, our £20 or £2, I can't remember actually what it is now, charges for the administration of providing replacement bins. I'll just make that technical point that it's not actually to pay for the bin, it's to pay for it to be administered and delivered. If and a green bin should always be replaced for free, regardless. If it's a black or a brown bin, the policy at the moment would be, if we believe that the damage was caused by our crew, and usually that would mean that they've reported it themselves. They've noticed it, maybe they've thrown it in the back of the lorry, reported it, and then a new and automatic gets delivered, or they've returned it and still recorded that. Then the customer shouldn't pay. The greyish area comes in where when you go online to order a new replacement bin, you are asked that question: do you believe it was caused by the council in effect? And if you say yes to that, you will get a free replacement bin. Now, yeah, exactly. So it's very difficult, isn't it? Because just being brutally honest, people always tell the truth on both sides, and we just got to be honest about that. So it means that, but how else do we do it? Really, we've just got to rely on people's honesty, and we wouldn't contest that. So I'd like to think, and certainly members that have always come to me asking for help, we try to take a pragmatic view. This isn't about trying to catch people out and trying to get our 22 quids in and that, but it is trying to be as fair as we can be in a process that probably can never be fully fair, because everybody doesn't always play by the rules. But we do try to be pragmatic. And so if you, as members, ever did come to us and said, look, we've got a particular person that's adamant that's happened and they're having a problem, we'll deal with it positively for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Actor. Oh, I beg your pardon.
My fault, Chair. I finished as I'd finished on it. Assisted collections. Yeah, absolutely. The route review in terms of the modelling, and again, I'm very happy to go through if you want how the model works outside of the meeting. But the model builds in an amount of time per bin for normal bins, for normal collections, and it builds in an extra amount of time for an assisted collection. And what we're doing with this through the route review is revising the current model to give additional time for assisted collections. I can't remember the top of my head what it was, but it's something like it was an additional 15 seconds or something in the old model, and we're increasing that to like a minute. So it's like a massive increase. Now that doesn't sound a lot, but actually that minute is quite a lot actually to go into someone's drive, pick a bin, take it back, on top of the amount that's already allocated for the bin. So we are increasing the amount of time for city collections by a considerable amount in the, yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Actor.
Chair, I should have said this earlier, but unfortunately, it just forgot to mention, even though I did mention at the full council meeting, sometimes we don't appreciate the hard work of our staff work during the difficult times. For example, the students' changeover, where 600 tons of unwanted refuse was collected from in a northwest part of the city. So I would like to put this on record, John, and I hope that you will pass it on to every single person who was involved in this huge operation in our neck of the wood, that we really appreciate the work our men and women work on the front line. And if you remember back in day when in June, July time, it was really warm, the temperature went up to 26, 27. And under those conditions, our men and women were working to keep our areas safe and cleaner and greener. So once again, please pass our thanks to all the staff who were involved and the management as well.
Thank you, Councillor Actor. And now it's Councillor Seary.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one regarding the glass collection pilot. Obviously, when we have the brown bin collections, sometimes soil greens drop on the floor. Obviously, glass is a bit more dangerous. So will the teams have a brush and pan to sweep up the excess? Sorry.
Yes, they certainly will, Councillor Seary. We do already collect glass from some communal bins across the city. So we have a team that are already used to doing this. When we run the pilot, that's one of the reasons for the pilot as well, is to really understand when we roll it out, to probably with thinking at the moment, the model will be through a smaller, different coloured bin for glass that will be collected monthly. But it will be a bin that will still attach to the back of a vehicle and either go up, or there's a top loading vehicle that most councils use for glass. And part of it will be to understand, is that giving problems? Is the glass falling regularly out, and is that causing a problem? How are we dealing with that? But absolutely, that would be the intention, to make sure that the crew are responsible. As you say, we can tolerate a bit of grass or a bit of whatever it might be, but glass has far more consequences to people and pets and wildlife. So absolutely, yeah, and that'll be part of what we'll look at. We are looking at trying to visit a couple of councils that are already doing it. Interestingly, though, there aren't many councils actually that collect glass separately currently. When you actually look from the curbside separately in bins, where most councils do it, it's either already it's mixed in another waste stream, or it's through a more container type way. There aren't many councils that do it through a bin, but we're trying to find a couple that we can go and see for exactly that sort of question. What happens?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. I'll try to be brief and constructive. Firstly, I think it would be good to invite you to the Outer North West Community Committee in September, as we're due to meet anyway, and that would be a good opportunity, hopefully, to work with the ward councillors and explore some of the review and probably some other questions. Then briefly on end of day follow-up. Often we see repeated reports of things like overgrown greenery and other things, and they keep coming back. But just a request to engage ward members where that would be useful in issues like that, so that we can support with it. And I think what we've seen sometimes with bits that have been missed on our routes is that the crew just don't know that they've missed something. So hidden cul-de-sacs and others where we've had temporary crews, and I suspect that's been part of the issue with missed reports. But again, something we're always happy to work on. Thank you. And yeah, and again to say thank you for the incredible work that is done, and we often only see when it goes wrong. Thank you.
Thank you again through the chair briefly. Community committees are very happy to accept that invitation and come in September. And again, for anybody else in terms of any of the community committees, always very happy to attend, whether it's at the subgroup or the community committee itself. Perhaps this paper that I presented today could be shared, maybe. So please do contact me if you'd like me to come to any of your community committees. And I think that's, again, I mentioned before about through the route review, it's not just about a route review, it's a service review, and how we work as a service. I'm talking we mainly refuse, because that's mainly what we're talking about today, but also obviously the Clean Neighbours team. And that's part of what we want to do. We want to get better at being and build that bit of capacity in, which is difficult for our staff to be able to have a better relationship with yourself, a closer relationship with yourself. I think that does work a lot of the time, and but it often depends on the particular member of staff, and we want to embed that as just something that we encourage and do more. I think the refuse service historically has been a very sort of, it's delivered citywide, and it was designed like that. So to be fair on the staff, they've not got that time or capacity to have that engagement, but it does happen. And I know that I'm sort of looking on the wheel, you'll all have had times when it does happen, when we do talk about, right, well, and often members will say to us, well, should we do the leaflet drop then to tell people stop parking on the street? Would it be better coming through us? Do you want it to come from you? So we have those discussions at a local level. But yeah, I agree. The more we can do of that, the better.
Thank you. I have a couple of issues I'd like to raise myself, Mr. Woolmer. First is, we've discussed the glass collection pilot, and that's on page 19. And we did have a very short discussion prior to the meeting with a couple of the members of the board who are in the wards which have been identified by you to receive such a trial. However, the information in here is very, well, it's very imprecise in terms of when such a pilot is expected to commence and when it is due to report. The council did introduce another waste pilot for food waste. That pilot lasted over a decade, and to my recollection, we still haven't had an evaluation of it so that we can actually draw any conclusions of that decade-long experience in terms of informing our future policy. So what assurance can members have that the glass collection pilot that is being proposed is going to report back sooner and with an ability to hit the ground running anytime soon? The second issue I'd like to raise is, I went back to the waste strategy for the city, which was delivered in 2019, which might not have been when you were around, Mr. Woolmer, because the report's author was Helen Freeman, but the executive member was the same. And in that, there were tensions mentioned, which are current tensions as well, which is obviously that you are awaiting government specification around what they were going to do about their waste policy, but also that you wished to have an emphasis on reducing waste in the first place, so that the emphasis wasn't always on tonnages for recycling, and actually it was all about, and it says in the paper, a city conversation on waste, and in particular engagement with the business community to reduce packaging and to tackle the level of business waste in the city, which is actually several times bigger than domestic waste, isn't it? And I just think it would be useful at a future meeting if some of the initiatives that were mentioned in that paper could be reported back to us, because that was an engagement process for the city rather than just having a conversation with DEFRA around their requirements and how we might respond to that. And then lastly, you mentioned in the paper the issue around, even once we decide what we want to do around our new waste management, the practical difficulties around the procurement of plant, and in particular vehicles, which is going to be an issue not just for us as a council, but also others. Have we done anything in terms of worked with other authorities or the local government association to look at how those procurement pressures might actually affect the implementation of what our vision asks for?
Thank you, Chair. So three main questions. So absolutely, the glass pilot, we need to learn from. I hesitate to call it the food pilot because it can a pilot last 10 years. I take that point. I think we do need to learn from that, both in terms of being clear about how we're going to evaluate the baseline, gathering baseline information, looking at the information that goes along, and being able to make an informed decision at the end of it, whether this is the best way forward and what we need to do in terms of some practicalities that Councillor Series talked about. So in order to do that, what we've done is made sure that we've commissioned some work to look at getting a good baseline in place. So we've done some exercises around in the wards where we're proposing to roll out the pilot already. We've looked at some of the composition analysis of the bins that are in those wards, black and green bins, somewhat glass is already in those bins, so we can then go back and measure the impact. And we've got that company booked in every 6 months now to come in and do that work in those areas. And also we're gathering information in terms of the bottle banks that primarily feed those areas. And again, we'll be looking at that and bringing that together in terms of baseline information. So that kind of does it work kind of look into the pilot, just to reassure you that will be a key part of the work. I'm more than happy to bring that information back through this board at a later date. But that will also, as Councillor Seri does point out, it is around practicalities as well. So it isn't just about tonnages and hopefully more glass being recycled than is currently recycled. It is around the practicalities of, so what will it mean when we roll it out? How much noise does it make? What are people's views on that? Is the spilt glass that the crews are picking up? So all that will be part of the pilot, the trial, and part of the evaluation that will be brought back. The second point I think I'd probably make around that is that we are in a slightly different place than when the food pilot started, in that we know there's legislation now already passed by government that says we will need to collect glass from the curbside. So we know we're going to have to do it. The only thing we don't know is the nuances of what we're allowed to do, how that would pan out citywide, and the funding attached to that, and the commencement date for that. But we know, unless things change, that's the current law. So there's a difference there in terms of hopefully reassuring people that we won't be sat here in 10 years' time with the glass pilot still in pilot stage. So I think that's part of what you're trying to highlight, the councillor. So hopefully that reassures in that way. Like I said, I'm very happy to bring back through this board any work around the pilot. In terms of timescales, we have said by 2023, and the point of being vague in that terms was we don't know yet. We're still working through the detail of how it will actually work, some of the practicalities around that, the crew, the vehicle that we will use, and making sure that we've got everything in place, and critically working with ward members around which area it will be. And we're doing some work at the moment with other authorities. Like I say, it's limited in terms of comparing apples with authorities, but a key part of the process of the glass pilot will be creating the routes. And just very quickly, just to give you an idea of why that's such an issue, we've got to go out to a group of people to, first of all, we think, to say, do you want this? Explain what it is. Do you want a blue bin, a purple bin, whatever it's going to be? You don't have to have one. I made that really clear in the report, and I emphasise this. The people don't have to have one. So we don't know what the take-up rate will be. So we don't know how big the area needs to start with. And then within the take-up rate, you'll have a presentation rate. So if we're saying that we can do routes that are around 1,000 bin collections a day, we don't know whether we should be writing to 2,000 people to offer that to. So we need to do some work around that and be careful around that and work with ward members around that carefully. Because when we do start it, even though it's a trial, we want to get as much right as possible in the first place. We don't want the trial to be making it up as we go along, making corrections. We want it to be, as much as we can agree is the right way to do things, and then learn from it. So that's why we are being, I'm sorry, it's not more precise at the moment, but we are committed to get this pilot up and running in this year, and we'll work, like I say, with ward members over the coming months around that. but we need to get it right. Reducing waste in the first place, absolutely right, Chair. So I'm very happy to come back to a future meeting on that and focus on that around reuse and reduce. Absolutely, I really welcome that. And the vehicle procurement, absolutely a huge issue in terms of facing all councils, and that is an issue that the LGA have raised, and LARAC, who the organisation that coordinate a lot of the council's responses to consultation. Both those organisations have fed back to DEFRA, as we have individually, that very issue. And in the council forum meetings that DEFRA have been hosting over the last few months, that issue is raised again and again around. It's a national capacity. It's not even just national. It's an international capacity issue in terms of the producers, the manufacturers of vehicles. We currently have about an 18-month lead-in period from raising orders to delivery, and that's without the new requirements being in place yet. So it will be a huge issue, but ultimately it's not something that we can particularly do anything with ourselves. It's a national, if not, like I say, an international supply and demand issue. We hope that those conversations are, because it's been raised for quite a while now, are happening with the manufacturing industry around that. But the added complexity around that is it's a developing industry around the fueling of vehicles like that. So there is the availability, and we're getting the delivery of our first electric vehicles next year. But that brings loads of other issues with that, with it being a developing technology, particularly with HGV size vehicles around. And again, perhaps anyone's interested, come and see me outside the meeting, but there are loads of complexities around that, around the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure for such size vehicles. And that's not just about your depot or your local place you're literally plugging into. It's about the load capacity where that depot or place sits. So there's a cost at the depot and into the infrastructure, but that's no good if there's only 3 megawatt capacity within that part of Leeds or whatever it might be. So there are huge issues, not just about the actual vehicles, but what type of vehicle and what's going to be available. But absolutely, Chair, that is going to be a huge issue. And one of the reasons that I say in the report, and what I'd say here, is that in reality, no one can see, and even the DEFRA officials that we're talking to, whether that be formal or informally, there is no way that the 2025 date would be achieved if that still doesn't get pushed back more, which I suspect it would. What will have to happen is it will be a period of time, probably between 2025 and 2030, where DEFRA will agree separately, presumably with the councils, about their implementation plan to get to a point they're meeting the legal requirements. That's the only way it can be done, not just for the reasons you've highlighted there, but lots of other infrastructural and just recruitment issues around LGV drivers. You know, we were looking in what I've presented in the report is if we went for separate glass and separate food collection. Just to be clear, we're not proposing that at this moment, but that's if you're crystal ball, and that's probably where it's being pushed towards. That's at the moment 40 extra vehicles and 40 extra crews across Leeds, and we send out about 70-75 a day at the moment. So it's a massive increase, and that's replicated across much of the country. So it is huge. It's great. It's the right direction, but there's got to be there's going to have to be some give somewhere with it.
Well, I think that's a particularly suitable note upon which to end our queries with you, Mr. Woolmer. So thank you very much for the information you've had today. Obviously, we'll be seeing you very soon, won't we, in terms of reviewing the budget and whatever, because quite a lot of this, as you pointed out, has budgetary implications. And thank you for answering our questions today. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. This is the Community Committee review. There are some officers here that weren't here at the beginning of the meeting. And for the interests of those who are on the board, but also those people who are viewing on the webcast, can we please have some introductions from members of the communities team.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Money, and I'm the Chief Officer in the Safer Stronger Communities team.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Liz Jarmin. I'm Head of Locality Partnerships.
Thank you very much. We already know that the executive member is here. That's Councillor Harland. So would you like to introduce the item, please, Mr. Money? For those on the webcast, we're currently having technical
Thank you.
difficulties. Over to you, Mr. Money.
I think, Chair, that might have been user error. I didn't think it was, but it may well have been, having just seen what Becky did there. Thanks very much, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce the paper, which I will assume members have had the opportunity to read. The Community Committee review links to work being done across the council in a number of areas, principally, I guess, in terms of the Best City Ambition refresh strategy, and also there are links with the most recent Local Government Association peer review, which reported towards the back end of last calendar year, where we're basically looking to optimise the way that we work and engage with local communities in a number of areas. Members will be really recognise the fundamental role that community committees play with regards to those arrangements. As I say, we're really grateful for the support that the board and panel members may be able to provide in terms of this review moving forwards. The report does detail the kind of scale and scope of the work that we are proposing with regards to the review, as well as some detail in terms of how we propose to take that particular work forward, principally in relation to a number of workshops, but some fairly significant, as you would expect, consultation widely, both with regards to elected members in the city and with officers working in support of the community committees, not just from within my team, but across the council. And of course, also the public in terms of public engagement. So I will pause there, Chair, other than to just suggest that consideration is given to the proposal around a cross scrutiny member workshop that we think would be helpful in terms of optimising the review that we're undertaking. We've also some thoughts, Chair, in terms of the role this specific scrutiny board can take kind of moving forwards, and would propose that we reconvene with this scrutiny board periodically throughout the duration of the review. Hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Opening up to members who'd like to ask questions of the team. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Something occurred to me reading through the report there and the terms of reference and the scope that's been defined. Quite sort of content with what's there, but it struck me one thing that wasn't covered was the question of community committee boundaries, and are they in the correct place? And so what constitutes a neighbourhood, and that is that something that could be reviewed as part of this process? I'm inclined to think that if we're doing a fundamental root and branch review of community committees, that is sort of germane to it. Thank you.
Mr. Money?
As far as I'm aware, I'm not aware that that the boundaries are within the scope of the review. Obviously, it's interesting feedback to get, something that we can look at again. But the scale and scope of the review is detailed in there, and you're right to identify the fact that that is not included at this present time.
Thank you. I really think it ought to be considered. It's we've recently gone through a parliamentary a review of parliamentary boundaries. There are periodic reviews of local government wards. Things change over time, and there is also, I think, a tie-in to the existing existing parliamentary boundaries and how they'll be changed and what implication that will have for communities, like who's your MP, are there things you want to work on with your MP. I would hope that we could deal with this at the same time, if we can get that, if that could be included within the scope. Thank you.
Councillor Harland.
Yeah, we're happy to take that away, but it's not something that we had considered. But happy to take that away. But seeing as I'll be in Selby, hopefully my MP will be in Selby at the end of today, and hopefully it'll be a Labour one. But we'll take that away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As chair, I thought it would be worth introducing a few issues on behalf of members that I think would be worthwhile clarifying in the proposals that you've got in your paper. So in paragraph 3, the report says, under the leadership of the Environment, Housing and Community Scrutiny Board, a cross-party scrutiny working group will be formed, which will involve representatives from other scrutiny boards. Now, the membership of that is equally distributed across those scrutiny boards, and it's chaired by the executive member. So in what way does this scrutiny board lead?
Thank you, Chair. What I would propose is that we are returning to this scrutiny board to provide regular updates. We're particularly thinking about updates from the workshops that are detailed in the report, and I think it would be helpful, and assume it would be helpful to members here to share some of the developing thinking that is emerging from those workshops, which will hopefully help shape and direct the review. In terms of timetables, we think probably the first opportunity to come back to this group as a suggestion would be before Christmas, when we should hopefully have undertaken at least 2 of the workshops that are referenced, as well as engaging with local officers, as I described. So that would be the suggestion, Chair, but very happy to take any feedback in terms of whether that works for this scrutiny board or whether there's any other considerations we maybe should be thinking about.
I think it's worth clarifying, Mr. Money, what value you think is being added by this scrutiny board by having those items come to our board at the frequency that you've just outlined, because it feels like we're not the primary participants, we're just the receivers of feedback.
That's not what I intended to portray, and if I did so, I'd clarify that point. We have worked with this particular scrutiny board on a number of reviews over a number of years, and always, to my knowledge anyway, always received really helpful feedback and support in terms of steering this review and helping ensure that the community committee arrangements moving forwards are as effective as they can be. They haven't been reviewed for a significant period of time, but would very much see this scrutiny board as being instrumental in terms of ensuring that that we're getting the best from this review.
Councillor Harland.
I think our bringing this to this scrutiny board in the first instance shows the respect that we have for this board. I've served on this board myself. We've worked with the previous chair on these things, and I think, as I say, bringing this to this board in the first instance, we always appreciate you are a critical friend. We're happy that the report is quite comprehensive, but we're happy to. The workshops, this is the start of the journey. The workshops will be where the nitty-gritty is boiled down to. And of course, we would love you to take part in those workshops, probably chair one of some of those workshops. Anybody can join. We want all 99 councillors to be involved because it is a root and branch apart from the ones that we've not taken into consideration.
Councillor Actor.
Chair, I really welcome this review. Being served as a chair for many years as a community committee chair in the Northwest, and I think Councillor Harland is absolutely right. It's an opportunity where members will have the opportunity. All 99 of us will have the opportunity to reshape the scrutiny board. The community committee board, because if you remember, Chair, that the whole idea of the community committee, area committee, and back in the CIT, the idea was to give the democracy and so people can have a say in their own localities, their own areas. So I really welcome this particular review, and I'm sure the new members will appreciate that this is an opportunity for them to take up, where some of us who have served in this council for many years, we have seen so many changes, and especially after the pandemic, it gives us the opportunity now to restart and reshape. So Paul, it's a good report. Let's all work together and for the benefit of our local residents that we serve, and let them have the say. So thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just again, coming back to paragraph 3, something we discussed briefly beforehand, the recommendation that chairs who also sit on a scrutiny board be given priority. As a chair, I'd actually like it to be as wide as possible. It may be that others have slightly different opinions, just to make sure we have as many members as possible encouraged to join in and be involved, rather than us be given priority where we're already probably more heavily integrated in the process. Thank you.
Thank you for that observation. And to be fair, Chair, you will recall making a similar observation in the Chair's brief. In terms of the paper, we would propose to proceed in the way that you've described. Actually, there's just that small error in section 3 where we'd not redacted that particular entry, but we picked that feedback up already, and we'll proceed in that way.
Well, it's encouraging you take on board feedback. One of the things that we are concerned about, actually, is that, as with scrutiny, all parties participate with parity of esteem. How are you ensuring that the workshops and the infrastructure that you've outlined in this report actually includes the voices of smaller parties within the council?
If I might answer that, Chair. So first of all, we're going to offer briefings to all the party groups, individual briefings, so to allow different voices to be heard and different opinions to be expressed. Some of those opinions may not align with other political views. So we're going to invite each of the chairs of the leaders of the groups to have a private briefing with me, or Paul, or both of us. We'll also be arranging for the workshops to be taken place on the morning of full council here in the Civic Hall, to allow as much engagement as possible, given that all 99 councillors will already be in the Civic Hall in the afternoon. We've already got sessions booked, the Civic Hall banqueting suite booked for the first couple of those sessions. So our intention is, we're quite happy as well outside of this meeting to take any feedback from committees around how we might engage with your with the members of your committees, regular attendees of your committees, and also about any groups that you'd like us to consult with locally in terms of how they engage with the committees and how they think that they might benefit. We genuinely want this to be as broad and as open and as transparent as we possibly can, so we can make the committees even better and more effective than they already are.
Well, you can have my apologies for a start for that meeting on Council Day. I think you'll find a lot of members already find it very difficult, especially if they're working, to take half a day off, let alone have to take a full day off to attend yet another session. Anyway, thank you for that. Are there any other questions from members? Yes, Councillor Actor.
I absolutely understand what you're saying, Chair, but on the same note, the officers have given us the opportunity. Now, surely if the 99 councillors cannot attend the full council meeting, there normally are 80 plus councillors. Now, all of us have been elected as a representatives of our communities. Now, this is a crucial point. I mean, giving time for our own local residents. Some of us have spent a lot of times, and many of you spend many hours of the day. But I think this is crucial, even though some people might not be able to attend those sessions, but the opportunities will be there. And that's the bit I think people need to understand. And thank you once again, Paul, and Liz. Liz, and for coming up with this idea of having a full council meeting. And I think many members will take the opportunity.
Councillor Anderson.
Just a clarification point on the attendance by the scrutiny members. Are you expecting the scrutiny members to come along to argue from their particular scrutiny board's perspective, or are you looking for them to come along with an independent mind? So, I mean, so in other words, are they there to represent themselves, their group, or the scrutiny board in terms of the views that they're expressing? Because most of us are probably quite capable of separating the roles out. So which is it that you're expecting? So the two people from here, do the two people from here basically have to find out our views first of all and then come along and feed them in? Or are we effectively saying to those people, you're free to say whatever you like, argue whatever point you like? Or should they be putting the scrutiny hat on and saying, well, this is going to affect the environment side of this or the housing side because of that? Which is it? It's not that I'm arguing, by the way, I'm just looking for clarity.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. I guess the short answer in some respects to that is all of that, really. Now, we're really interested, obviously, in the perspective from the respective scrutiny boards, but we will be and intend to engage as Councillor Akhtar really outlined, really, as much as we can with all 99 members. But want to get as many different perspectives as we possibly can in the spirit of what Liz has talked about in terms of the thoroughness, the transparency of the approach that we intend to pursue. So it really is kind of all of that. But in terms of scrutiny, we're looking for perspectives from all scrutiny boards across the council as part of that.
Okay. Well, we look forward to engaging with you. Councillor Harland.
Can I just finish on a note that the Electoral Commission found back in the day that we retained 99 councillors because of the work that's carried out or should be carried out in community committees. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attendance. On to the next item. The next item is a referral to scrutiny, which is from Councillor Dixon. And we're just going to set Councillor Dixon up so that he can report on that referral so that we can consider it. For the interest of those watching on the webcast, the referral is associated with the potential dangers of radon gas. And once Councillor Dixon has offered his perspective and reasons for referral, we will then have a short discussion with officers whose experience is in the areas of housing and health. Councillor Dixon, are you ready for us?
Ready when you are.
Thank you. You've got 5 minutes.
Thanks for inviting me here today to talk about this issue. And I hopefully everyone's read the document I've provided prior to today. It's an issue that's been flagged up to me by residents in Leeds, and I just didn't want it to be one of those issues that gets overlooked and before we know it's too late. So that's the reason I'm flagging it today. So radon gas. So it's colourless, odourless radioactive gas. And it's formed by radioactive decay of small amounts of uranium that occur naturally in all rocks and soils. And this gas is the concern today. And there's a document said, you probably read it, it tells you a bit more in depth about the risks to health. And it's said to have an impact on cancer and soft tissues in the body. And it's from radioactivity. So obviously it's a bit of a concern for us all that this is flying around in our city. The exposure levels are provided some maps, which you may see later on in the document. The range across the city, but you'll probably find the main concerns are in areas for me, like personally my own ward of Middleton Park, but also pretty much most of the south and east of the city, and not excluding other parts of the city as well. And so according to the UK Radon website, it is very harmful from increased exposure. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to flag it up, because I want us to understand if anybody is at risk or if we are within the parameters to not cause a concern. And I want everyone to be reassured that we are safe, I suppose. So apparently radon gas was first addressed to Leeds City Council over 3 years ago by a resident in the Kirksall ward, who's done quite a lot of research regarding this since the death of a family member from ovarian cancer. So testing by Yorkshire Water had highlighted the increase above normal of radiation in the drinking water to that property. And this was flagged with the Public Health Department for Leeds, and advice was highlighted that Leeds had a plan to handle radon gas, but so not to worry people. So this, according to this resident, turned out later via responses from environmental information requests of the timeframe to be incorrect. And this resident felt that no plan was in place across the city to handle or deal with radon gas as a public health authority. Testing was then reluctantly carried out by officers and advised, and they believed there was no need to test further. Following a 3-month time frame of testing, as suggested by UK Radon, this reported levels at conclusion of 179 peak. I think it's I can't say it, BQ meters squared, cube, sorry, at the property. This clearly highlighted that testing or further testing was needed to investigate radon gas across the city. So a year's worth of testing has been actioned as far as I understand in parts of Morley. And as a councillor, I believe it should have been tested further and more wider, because it's not just Morley that's the issue. Obviously, there's more detail in this report I'll let you read through, and probably all have recently. But one of the concerns in this report for me was the number of council houses affected. In my own ward, there's over 3,000 of them, and we are top of the list according to the British Geological Survey. And the third, so the top is Middleton and second is Belle-Isle, both which are in my ward. And Morley is the third largest council tenants with over 1,000. And then Rothwell comes in 4th place with 804. So as I've mentioned earlier, south and southeast of the city are quite impacted by it. So I'm just asking today that we protect our residents in our council housing.
If you could just draw your comments to a conclusion.
I will do, sorry. Yeah, so I'm just asking today that obviously under the Housing Act 2004, we are responsible for the tenants in our properties, and this is the reason I'm flagging it today, to make sure that we are ensuring safety of those tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. We've already got the executive member introduced herself earlier, Councillor Lennox, but we also have other officers who are from the housing section of the council, but also from public health. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, and then I might perhaps invite Gerard Tinsdale to start the comments from those officers.
Thank you, Chair. Gerard Tinsdale, Chief Officer for Housing.
Good morning, Adam Crampton, Head of Property Management, Housing.
Good morning, my name's Dawn Bailey. I'm Chief Officer for Public Health with a lead for health protection in the council.
Thank you, very welcome. Gerard, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the information that you just shared there, Councillor Dixon. The information we've received from the UK Health Secretary Agency suggests the risk is low in the city. But we want to take a lead role in confirming this position. We don't want to rely necessarily on generic low risk assessments available to us. And we want to carry out some additional testing across the city. And that's what we're doing at this moment in time. I've got Adam with me who leads in this area. I'm going to pass over to Adam now, which will just give you a little bit more information about the testing that we're doing. And I think also just highlight a little bit of clarity around the parts per million in terms of where, as an authority, it would be considered a risk to health, and at that point when action levels should actually be considered. So I'll pass it over to Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Dixon. Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is radon gas is clearly not just a risk in Leeds. It's a UK wide, and there are certain areas of the country, particularly in South Wales, the southwest of the country, where it's a significant higher risk than in Leeds. There's little by way of data or information about to support any concern that it's a high risk in Leeds, be that empirical or anecdotal information, but equally that doesn't allow us to then prove that the risk is low in Leeds. So back to Gerard's point, that's something that we're really keen to do. And we have, in consultation with the UK Health Security Agency, formerly Public Health England, developed what we see as a robust yet proportionate approach to testing right across the city. And there are a few anomalies in the information that you provided that I would just like to clarify. You made reference to 52,000 homes being potentially at risk. Around 45,000 council homes are in the lower banding of less than 1% risk category. That effectively means no risk. So there are 9,136 in either the 1 to 3% risk category or 3 to 5%. They're the lowest two risk categories within the radon gas assessment, the highest being above 30%, as we see in those areas that I previously made reference. So although the information that we have, and we have commissioned an advanced assessment through the UK Health Security Agency, that's actually the information that you've provided. That's our information that we did provide on request of a Freedom of Information Act, and happy to do so. Transparency and openness has always been our approach as far as this matter is concerned. The 9,136 properties are the properties that we are testing. Purely in terms of numbers, as you correctly point out, Middleton and Belle Isle are at the top of the list there, but they're within the 1 to 3% risk category area. Morley being in the 3 to 5% risk category area. So in terms of the pure numbers, I accept that's third in the list, but it is a higher risk area, albeit still a relatively low risk. It is the higher risk area. So in consultation with UK Health Security Agency, we've developed our testing methodology and programme. That's been, for want of a better term, endorsed by the UK Health Security Agency and is now underway. So our testing programme is not limited to Morley by any stretch of the imagination. It's just starting in Morley because that's the highest risk area in terms of both radon rating and volume.
Okay, thank you. Dawn, did you have any comments to make on the issue?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of things really, just to say that we are working really closely with the UK Health Security Agency National Radon Cell, who are advising all of the steps that we're taking within the council. And a couple of other points to clarify really, that radon is one of the gases within our environment that impacts on health. So there are lots of other things that impact on our health and particularly on our respiratory health. Other things that would impact are smoking, and smoking obviously is our biggest cause of lung cancer. But the evidence does suggest that where people are exposed to radon for very long periods of time, very high levels of radon, that can increase your risk of lung cancer. But the main cause of lung cancer is smoking still in this country. However, we are taking this very seriously as a council, working with our colleagues in housing and with the UK Health Security Agency. We're taking a very, we do believe, and has been validated by a UK Health Security Agency, a sensible measured approach that's proportionate. As colleagues have said, we have areas within the city, as do lots of other places within the country, that have 3 to 5% risk of radon being around in the environment. And what we're doing is doing that further testing. More information became available in December of last year, which you provided some maps, and the information that became available in December was a much more granular version of that, so we can really understand where we can be more targeted. And that's exactly what we're doing and colleagues are doing within housing. So that we need to be able to actually detect radon within homes, following what we believe to be the UK Health Security Agency validated methodology. And once we've detected it, then we can do something about it. So that's what we're doing. We're taking a stepped, proportionate approach, and then we will be able to take action if we need to. And just one other point, I did do some work with colleagues within the UK Health Security Agency and public health colleagues within the council, just looking at lung cancer rates, particularly within the areas that we're discussing. And currently, with the data that we do have available, looking at a population level, both Kirkstall, Morley and some of the other areas identified are not outliers for lung cancer, but we are very vigilant. We keep an eye on this. We'll work really closely with partners and make sure that this continues to have the attention it needs.
Thank you. Can I open it up to board members? Councillor Actor.
Yeah, if I can just ask Councillor Dixon, I mean, there are many channels that we can use as elected members in this authority. What was the reason for bringing it to the scrutiny board rather than directly to the housing or to the health sector? Because I feel that if every time, and that's with respect, Chair, every time someone raise an issue with us as elected members, are we going to bring it to the scrutiny board? Are we going to deal it with the department and see if we can find some solution to the problem? So what was the exact reason that you brought it to the scrutiny board rather than going direct to the housing or to the health board?
Initially I did actually talk to them last year, and I just felt that the issue needed to be put on a bigger audience because it's such a wide scale issue for the city. So yeah, I did initially touch base with them, and yeah, that's the reason really, just for a wider audience.
So you raised it with the departments, and then you wanted a bigger audience. But bigger audience to me is, if I was a independent councillor, I would raise it at the full council meeting and see if the exec board can respond to your queries. I mean, I'm not having a dig at you, but I'm just trying to get my own head around it. I mean, in future, if someone raises an issue which affects many of my local residents, do I need to bring it to the scrutiny board, or do I need it to the council? Or, I mean, can you understand, it might be an education for me as someone who might be losing touch, basically. So I'm just trying to learn from yourself. Why wouldn't you raise it at the full council meeting rather than bringing it to the scrutiny board?
Yeah, it's more because I'm more focused on how it affects council tenants. So this is the board to bring it to. Yeah, I admit the full council would have been another one, but it would have been very difficult as a small group to get that brought to full council anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Actor. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Any other questions from board members? Okay. Just to clarify the formal aspect, Councillor Dixon obviously brings it to the attention of scrutiny, and it's up to the scrutiny chair to put it on the agenda for discussion. I think this is of a wider interest than just Councillor Dixon, and therefore deserved some primary investigation to see whether this would be a big enough issue to constitute a scrutiny inquiry in its own stead. So members do have the information with them in the papers. The actions that were mentioned by officers, I don't recall that being part of the documentation which is here. So the question we need to ask at this meeting is, do members at this stage feel that this should be an area that we take up for inquiry, or would they prefer to have some further information from officers about what they will be doing as part of their operational duties to investigate this issue before deciding that it required a wider investigation? One of the things that would be useful, of course, is understanding whether or not other local authorities have pursued similar investigations around radon, because I do appreciate that some parts of the country, because of geology, radon is a bigger issue for them in terms of presence in properties. So I think that would be useful for me anyway, as a chair, to understand what value we could add in Leeds through scrutiny. At this first instance, though, we need to have some indications from members about how they feel. Councillor Stables.
It sounds to me, I understand that there is a concern around radon, of course, but it sounds to me as if the housing department and the officers who have responded today have got a clear plan and procedure and process in place in order to evaluate what the risk is. And I think that's, personally, I feel like that's where we need to go. We need to have a clearer understanding of where we're at, really, in terms of what the actual risk is and the scale of it. And it sounds to me that the process is already in place, and it would be good to get an understanding of how long that's going to take, the scale of it, and when we will hear back. And then let's get that information back and then make a decision from that information as to whether we take it forward or not.
Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm in support of the option that you outlined and what Councillor Stables has said there. I think it would be helpful to have sort of more information about the testing that's gone. From what the officers have said this morning, there's nothing that leaps out at me that says that we've something is fundamentally going wrong at the level of process. It sounds like it's being approached in the right way in consultation with national authorities. It would be good to know about to get know a bit more. I do think your suggestion, Chair, about checking in with other local authorities is a good one. I would suggest, particularly thinking of local authorities in the southwest. I mean, my guess is a big city. Plymouth is probably be a good place to start, as a sort of a big city like ourselves in an area where they do have like a well-known higher incidence of radon in the country as a whole. But definitely one worth looking at. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Seary.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a bigger issue for the whole city, and we shouldn't be just focusing on social housing tenants. You know, it's for all residents. So I don't know if it's worth going out to a different scrutiny or a different area, but I don't think we should just focus our energy on social housing tenants.
Mr. Crampton, you nodded.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Siri. It is something that we absolutely have discussed. Because of the scale of the council housing in the city, we're keen to use that as a baseline in order to gather that data from which we can then engage with public health colleagues about the wider implications for other tenures within the city.
Okay, thank you. I think the conclusion of that discussion was that we'd really appreciate. Oh, Councillor Lennox.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to comment before we finish the item.
Yes, and I think we feel that a report would be very useful for us in terms of giving an evaluation of the investigations that you've had, and perhaps adding some of that detail that we've had through discussions today in terms of comparison with other authorities. And then when that report comes back, we can then decide whether or not it merits further scrutiny. Did that? Yes, members seem to be okay with that. Yes, Councillor Lennox.
Thank you. I just really wanted to say thank you for the opportunity for the officers to explain the sort of proportionate response that they are taking to given the testing and the monitoring that will happen with vigilance, as was explained, I think is an appropriate response to the detailed assessments that have been done about the risk in the city. So it's work that's already started, and I'm sure obviously the board has come to a decision about what they want to happen next. But I think I just want to underline that I think my feeling when this was brought to my attention is that the action plan is there and the response is proportionate to the risk that we've been presented with.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dixon, and thank you for the officers for your attendance for the discussion of that item. And on to our next item on the agenda, Becky.
I can just ask members to note the work programme. I'll pick up the items that have already been highlighted for future scrutiny today. And if I can just draw members' attention to 2 invitations that have gone out this week in relation to budget consultation. An all scrutiny member briefing remotely in September on the 21st with Victoria Bradshaw, and then a board specific budget consultation session on December the 15th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're all noting the date of the next meeting. And thank you for your attendance. Meeting closed.